I have a challenge for you. Imagine you're talking to someone you have never met before, someone you know nothing about, and who, in turn, knows nothing about you. Now, explain everything about yourself, your life, your emotions, your relationships, your dreams. Make this person understand everything about you, and not just on a surface level, but in a deep, intimate way. You have 30 minutes. Go. It seems impossible, doesn't it? Humans are complex. You are complex. There are so many intricacies and subtleties that make each human unique. We all have our own stories. We all have our own lives. We all have our own desires. We all have our own dreams. Even with infinite time, it's impossible to explain everything about yourself. In order to understand everything about someone, you have to be them. And even then, I would be negligent to claim that I know everything about myself. So, with 30 minutes, what do you say? What do you do in order to explain who you are on a deep and intimate level? Is it easier to understand someone to that degree when it's someone you've never met before? Perhaps knowing someone to any small degree creates preconceived notions that can prohibit a full and accurate understanding. Well, there's no clear answer, nor will there ever be. But in just 30 minutes, Florence does its best to demonstrate the journey to understand someone, even if it's in the context of a video game. Florence is a game about intimacy, not with others, but with your surroundings and everyday objects. The game has no complexities in gameplay. Nothing exciting happens. There's not a moment of exciting gameplay, yet every moment of gameplay is intimate, it's thoughtful, and it's engaging. In much the same way that comedy can be provocative without being mean-spirited, offensive, or degrading, games can be provocative without being intense, complicated, or busy. Florence does not start your journey with any exciting cutscene or epic level, no. The game starts with you turning off an alarm clock. It's such a simple task, only demanding one click of a button to continue. But a moment so simple gives root to the game and the lead character, Florence. After you turn off your alarm, Florence gets up and goes about her average day, with you as the player helping her complete those basic, simple tasks. One of the first tasks Florence demands you to complete is brushing your teeth. So, how do you do this? It's simple. You move a toothbrush around a blank, white box. This is such a bizarre way to start a game. This gameplay isn't exciting, this isn't innovative. Some may say this is boring, mundane, or maybe even meaningless. You could be brushing your own teeth, but instead you're brushing the teeth of a character in a video game. Florence operates on the concept of non-gameplay. That isn't to say Florence is devoid of gameplay. Quite the opposite, in fact. Florence simply challenges how players interact with the game and creates a deviation from the expectations set by using the term gameplay. Rather than have a solid gameplay loop, Florence settles with every section of the game being quite different while remaining coherent. This is done to tell a story, as Florence uses a variety of gameplay in order to establish the variety of aspects in the story. Each section of gameplay is different because the gameplay of each chapter is designed to support a specific moment or aspect of the story. While Florence is intended to defy the expectations that are traditionally set for a video game, Florence is also willing to use expectations as a tool for emotional impact. Each gameplay element, be it puzzles or drawings or movements in the world, sets a certain expectation for the player. This is a traditional aspect of game design, that a game uses the same visual cues or imagery in order to establish familiarity with the player. Because modern games are so visually advanced and dense, visual coherence is necessary for the player to be able to smoothly interact with the world. Have you ever been playing a somewhat linear mission in an expansive game world? In those moments, how do you know where to go? Oftentimes you know where to go by an arrow in the user interface, or UI. But what happens when you take that away? In a game, the UI should function as a language to the player that helps explain exactly what is happening, but at the same time the UI is an additive element. In any game, the designer would rather have the player look at the gameplay than the UI. So even when the UI is removed, the player should still have some idea of where to go. That's visual coherence. This can be a matter of lighting, patterns, or shape repetition, but either way, the player is lured by the game into the correct path, and even when there are many other paths the player could take, the player is still led down the correct way. Florence uses this philosophy in a unique way to create an emotional impact in the player. Take these text bubbles from Chapter 5, for example. In this chapter, you and Krish are on a date, talking with each other. Once the puzzle is introduced, it's fairly simple to understand. The player drags the right pieces into the right spaces in order to form a text bubble from the tools that the game gives them. Naturally, on a first date, talking with your date, someone who you've quickly developed a crush on, is a bit awkward. When you first meet someone, it takes time to develop a rhythm and feel natural with them. This sentiment is echoed in Florence, as at first there are quite a few pieces to put in place to generate a text box. But once you finish your first text box puzzle, each subsequent puzzle gets easier and easier with gradually fewer pieces. Eventually you end up with just 2 pieces left, and once you do that, another 2 pieces appear. This time, when you move one piece, the other moves on its own to connect to yours. You only have to do half of the work. Now the conversation is flowing smoothly and talking is much easier. You have had a conversation, and the gameplay allows the player to fully understand the character's interactions. That moment is made so much more vibrant because of the gameplay that was attached to it. And during the entirety of that conversation, not a single word of dialogue was written. This does many things. For one, it allows the players to project themselves onto Florence and project other thoughts onto Krish. But more than this, it serves as a reminder that words that are spoken don't matter. It's the emotion that we're attached to. Giving words only adds to the jungle of thoughts, but without dialogue, we can fully understand these characters in this moment without having to be jangled in words. It is in these emotional emphases that the relationship between Florence and Krish is formed. The game forces you to emotionally invest in these characters' lives. When Florence and Krish's relationship reaches the point where they move in together, you are given a new type of puzzle. Well, in truth, this isn't a puzzle at all. The game takes you through various sections of the house in order to move in and place some of Krish's belongings alongside yours. But it comes with a catch. There isn't enough room for all of your belongings and all of Krish's belongings. So in order to complete the chapter, you must choose what stays and what goes to storage. Your decisions ultimately do not affect the game, however, because the game is focused on emotionally investing the player into the role of Florence. The decision feels as if it carries weight. For me, as a woman, I felt very conflicted when making these decisions. I was worried that by removing my belongings in favor of Krish's, I was constraining Florence's life as an independent woman. But at the same time, I wanted to help foster Florence's relationship with Krish, so I wanted to compromise and allow him to integrate into the relationship. That is a portion of the game where decisions don't matter, but each individual player will approach this chapter in a very different way. That, in some respects, forces self-reflection on our own motives. Are we playing this game for ourselves, or are we playing it for Florence? Ultimately, the point is, it doesn't matter. Florence is easily moved by the world around her. Florence has a potent emotional side. She is swayed by the environment she's in. The game relays this information early when Florence meets Krish. She is walking outside when her phone dies, so she decides to remove her headphones. Once she does that, she engages more with the world around her. She is grounding herself into the world now. But then she hears the notes of music. A beautiful note. Then another, and another, and another. And soon after, the music brings Florence off her feet. She is elevated off the ground as she allows the music to sweep her away. As she gets further, she accepts that she is floating away, and she embraces it, allowing herself to fully surrender to the music. And as she gets close, she discovers Krish playing the music in the streets. The player is given the information to embrace the role of Florence. We don't know everything about her, but we know everything about how she works, how she thinks, and how she interacts with her world. So, as the player, our decisions, which may be based on our own experiences, are direct aspects of Florence's emotional sways. The game limits your decisions in a way that you have the freedom to emotionally sway Florence without changing the fact that she is herself. She is Florence, not us. So, who is Florence? We understand her emotions, we care about her, and we have engaged with her world. But who is she? Considering the short length of the game, there is no way to fully explore every aspect of the character, but there's still plenty of time to understand them. And in order to allow the audience to understand the character, it's imperative to ensure the character is fully developed. Even if some details of the character are left out or not explored in the duration of the game, having every aspect of the character developed is key to writing the character in a way that can be fully understood. All of this to say that a character needs to be fully developed in order to be understood by the player, even if some aspects of the character are not displayed in the final product. And developing a character is hard. You need to have a mastery over your own character. Anything less than the character is only a facade of your own imagination, failing to fully embody the creator's vision of the character. Fortunately, Florence succeeds in this aspect, where many pieces of media fall short. The second chapter provides enough context of Florence's life for the audience to understand who she is. That said, the context provided in this chapter is not full. It's enough to generate a connection and nothing more. But that is by design. This allows the audience more time to grow alongside Florence and learn her story. Chapter 2 gives you a surface-level understanding of the character, allowing the audience the freedom to generate their own thoughts and advance that thoughts with the story. In Chapter 2, we learn that Florence has a creative disposition. The game allows the player to create these simple pictures out of translucent paper. It's a fairly childish piece of art, and it doesn't affect anything in the game, but still, somehow, there's a draw to put real effort into the piece. Not only are we learning about Florence, we are directly engaging with her crafts. Because the art you create has no effect on the remainder of the game, it is representative of the fragility of creative desires. Since you are playing a game, you make this piece of art solely based off of your own desires and willingness. You can put a few pieces of paper onto the shape and progress, but you still have the freedom to take time, as much time as you want. This is exactly how childish crafts function. You can put as much or as little effort in as you want. You are simply creating the thing that you want to create. And you aren't creating it for some financial or productive goal in mind. I suppose that's the cynicism of being an adult artist, that creative outputs are monetized into products to advance your brand and name. But this moment is free of any cynicism. Your art isn't real. It's going to go away. You can't hold on to it. You can't take it from the game. But you still put the exact amount of effort in that you want to put into it. In this short, simple moment, you are not only learning about Florence, not only are you engaging with her crafts, you are projecting your childhood whimsicalities onto Florence. But at the same time, Florence's creativity is a factor of constraint. Desire and expectation are often not compatible, which mandates people to consider their priorities. Desires can be a risk, but ignoring your desires can be devastating, if not deadly. So despite having artistic and creative desires, Florence's mom forces Florence to pursue math and academia. Your art is forced to the wayside in favor of elementary maths. Florence is expected to have an interest and pursue mathematics, but the game makes it clear that these interests are being forced upon her and are not her true desires. The game forces you to answer simple addition issues on notebook paper. Oftentimes, artists pursue art because they have ideas, but they struggle to fully express them. That's my story, at least. I'm a published game designer and artist, but the truth is I nearly went into law. The high school I attended was very prestigious, and I felt compelled to pursue prestigious careers as a result, so I decided I should be a lawyer. I would often use arguments and debates as creative escapes to find new solutions and clever answers. I thought that those tools would translate well to a job in law. But I realized something. I had so many creative urges and desires. I had ideas that I was struggling to verbalize. There were so many things I wanted to say, but I didn't know how to say them. So I decided to change my plan and study game and graphic design instead. Art is a tool to allow one's creative mind the freedom of expression. By limiting Florence's creative freedom, Florence is forced into mental isolation. The game represents this tangibly through Florence and her friends. Over time, as Florence grows gradually older, Florence's friends distance as they all grow distracted by professionalism. Ultimately, Florence ends up in a job that is soul-crushing, one in which Florence finds no joy. Her life is tedious and sad. She follows a routine and eats bland microwave dinners to continue. She's alive, but she's hardly living. She's just going about her miserable, empty job. Because she has been living such an empty life, she's in the perfect position to be swept away into something meaningful and special. And that's when she meets Krish, and she's taken off her feet by his music. It's a small moment, just an average person playing music on the streets, and Florence nearly missed it because she was too busy in her routine, listening to music and looking at her phone. But when she has that chance opportunity to engage with the world around her in an unexpected way, she's taken away by awe and joy. A small moment can make such a tremendous impact in the right heart at the right time. And for Florence, this time is now, an escape from her monotony. It's a life-changing moment, an instance of joy that breaks the mold of tedium. When a life divulges into tedium like Florence's, any new outlier event can be a stick in the gear that stops everything and allows for change. Seeing Christian floating away to his music fundamentally changes her. For once she feels happiness, she realizes that there are still good things in the world that can be so hollow and soulless. From the first interaction, Krish becomes the instance of humanity that grounds Florence in optimism. Her job is so cynical, she struggles to make connections, and that makes her cold and unwelcoming. But here with Krish, playing his music for all to hear, it reinvigorates Florence's soul. It inspires her creativity once again. In Chapter 4, Florence has another chance encounter with Krish. While she had the one opportunity to discover Krish's talent, an encounter that filled her with hope and joy, she now has an encounter that allows her to personally connect to Krish. So far, their connection is solely based around Florence's admiration of his music, not a true admiration of him. So how do they meet? They don't exchange numbers or talk to each other, no. They meet when Florence sees her while riding her bike. She remembers the music, the connection that she felt, and she stares at him. Unfortunately, staring at someone while riding a bike oftentimes prevents someone from staring at the road, and she crashes. What follows are a series of puzzles that the player has to solve to bring things into view. At first we see a distorted image of a bike, but by moving both sliders to the correct spot we see the crashed bike in proper proportion. Then, eventually, we see a warped image of Krish, and once we bring him into focus, Florence is able to engage with him, and it allows her to talk to him, and him to talk to her, and it all culminates when Krish gives Florence his number. Finally, she has a personal connection with the one who has inspired her. Finally, the one who inspired her knows who she is. Life often happens by chance encounters. Some of the greatest opportunities happen in the spur of the moment when it's least expected. For Florence, she only hears Krish's music because her phone dies. She only meets Krish because she got distracted when seeing him on the streets. These may be deemed coincidences, instances of plot convenience that are not representative of how the world works. I disagree. Yes, they are coincidences, but coincidences are often aspects of life. These are chance encounters, but chance encounters do happen. They may not happen every day for every individual, but they happen for Florence. And if by some misfortune they didn't happen, we wouldn't have much of an interesting story or game. These moments may not be likely, but that's exactly what makes them so engaging. Florence is not a special person. There's nothing about her that entitles her to superior treatment. She is just a creative soul that is wandering in a hollow world. She is no different than us. What happens to Florence here is indicative of the sort of life-changing moment that could happen to any of us. Those rare instances do happen, and when they do, Florence teaches us to embrace them, to engage with opportunity, to allow yourself to grow and change. So, Florence and Krish go out on their first date together. The game uses a graphic novel style to depict their dates, going to local bakeries and just spending time together. It's all innocent, it's all charming, it's that optimistic depiction of young love where it seems like destiny has made its match, and the two, only knowing each other for a day, are already perfect for each other. As if they already prepared to live their lives together, that the love will last forever and only continue to grow but never diminish. That is their love, so sudden, so strong, so potent, as if nothing else in the world matters. This is when the game introduces the dialogue mechanic, using puzzles to complete dialogue boxes. By introducing this mechanic in a happy scene, the game opens up the design space to malleate the mechanics to their whims. The mechanic is embedded into the player, and that can now be used for emotional manipulation in the intent of the story. They are happy together. Talking is easy now. Florence hardly even has to think, her words form so seamlessly. She begins to once again float away in the moment. Her love swells her heart. As the scene progresses, the music grows louder and louder, more overwhelming, more melodious. Florence is fully engaging with that moment. Krish seems like more than any other man could be. Krish, in Florence's mind, is almost supernatural, the one that silences the rest of the world as her love grows stronger. He is the one that can make her happy, the one who rescued her from monotony and tedium. Florence finds freedom in Krish, and so she finds herself attached to Krish in all ways. In the next chapter, we're introduced to a new storytelling mechanic. We understand now that Florence and Krish both have dreams beyond their current lives. Florence had buried her interest in painting under tedium and monotony. She had been so distracted by mundanity, and Krish had a potent musical talent but is left to play on the streets. Their connection is formed through Florence's admiration of Krish's music, and thus much of the foundation of their relationship is tied to their dreams. They both believe that they could be doing something more than they're doing right now, that there is more meaning to their work than the constrained lives they've been trapped within. And now that Florence feels this reinvigoration towards her art and appeal, these dreams seem so much more obtainable. To show this, Chapter 6 has the players draw through a thought bubble to reveal Krish's dreams of joining a music academy. And Florence, so fascinated by Krish, so attracted to him, although, as a lesbian I don't know how this is possible, starts to draw him. Florence's artistic side is rekindled by Krish, and now that kindling is her inspiration. She had no motive to draw, and now her motive to draw is also the object of her art. It can be hard to find the right inspiration to advance your creative dreams, but when it does happen, it can be life-changing. This moment, for Florence, is life-changing. She's beginning to understand that not only is she in love, but she is capable still of pursuing her dreams. When Florence hears about Krish's desire to join a music academy, she is adamant to push Krish to join. As the player repeatedly pushes the right button, Florence pushes Krish one step closer to the music academy. As much as creative rejuvenation can be life-changing, pursuing those opportunities to live your dream can be daunting. Dreams leave so much room for doubts. The greatest obstacle in pursuing a dream is fear that you'll never actually achieve it. Just because you have a chance to join a music academy doesn't mean you'll be accepted. It doesn't mean you'll enjoy it. And it doesn't mean you'll find what you were hoping to find. And these things aren't indefinitely limiting. Perhaps it's just not the right time. But if you pursue an opportunity at the wrong time and face rejection or failure, how willing will you be to pursue it again? Thus, even the greatest desires with the greatest opportunities often need an outside push. And for Krish, that push is Florence. Now that Florence has so suddenly become a part of his life, he has an exterior value. He's not left alone to his doubts because Florence is there to encourage him. So, by Florence's hand, Krish finally joins and begins to pursue his dream. As Florence and Krish settle into their new relationship, they continue to make new memories together. On Florence's work corkboard, we see photos of all their journeys together, from dates to meeting Krish's family. Florence and Krish's relationship has grown beyond just what has been shown on screen. And for once, despite Florence's menial job, Florence is actually happy. Her job is not improved, but now she feels as if she has something to look forward to. She has reason to be happy and endure her work. Now that she has something that she cares about so deeply, the work she does doesn't quite seem as miserable anymore. Love can make a miserable experience seem bearable when there's a future to look forward to. So far, Florence's relationship has been reflective of perfection. We are shown the hope, the freedom from meaningless. Florence and Krish have been mutually beneficial to each other, and their relationship has enabled them to be happier and draw closer to their dreams. However, even in the best, most wonderful relationship, things aren't always perfect. In fact, perfection is not an ideal that relationships should strive for. Imperfections are part of what make us human. The intimacy any person has with the world is directly related to their faults. And the truth is, Florence is not a love story. It's a human story. Relational stories always run the risk of depicting the good without recognizing the humanity that contextualizes that good. A perfect relationship isn't good. It's fake. And thus we have Chapter 9 of Florence, the one where things go wrong. Chapter 9 is also the first instance where Florence uses mechanical repetition for narrative design. When Florence and Krish go grocery shopping for the first time, they begin to talk, and text bubbles return. But this time the conversation is not fully uplifting. Instead, they grow frustrated with each other. The puzzle pieces to this point have connected with rounded and smooth edges, with words smoothly coming together and flowing kindly. But as Florence and Krish grow frustrated, their connection becomes flat. These words aren't nice anymore. They're frustrated. They're not quite angry yet, but the tension is growing, and suddenly the pieces grow sharp, pointed edges. Now their words are angry and targeted, like knives set to stab each other. Both Florence and Krish are directly angry with each other, attempting verbal battle to settle the argument. And then the puzzle becomes a race to get words out faster than the other. The faster you speak, the better you perform in the argument. This conversation is no longer about putting together words with thoughtfulness. Now it's a matter of overwhelming the other. And no matter what you, as the player, do, Florence winds up losing the argument and grows sad and angry at Krish. This is the first moments of ugliness presented to the player, and it allows speculation that maybe this relationship won't work out. But one petty argument is not enough to diminish the meaning and love they have produced between each other. If anything, this moment allows them to understand how the other deals with conflict, and so, when all is said and done, Krish and Florence make up with each other and grow closer again. The game's lack of words in these moments allows the player to understand the emotion of the conversation rather than troubling the player with context. We don't know why they grew angry. We don't know the roots of their argument, but it doesn't matter. It happens. Anger happens. Arguments happen, and how we react is a reflection of our feelings in those moments. Florence is not trying to teach the player about the details of Florence's life. It's trying to create such an understanding between the player and Florence that the player feels an emotional investment in her life. We don't need to understand each word in each situation, we just need to understand how Florence feels. And the game leaves you reflecting on that argument for 6 months. Right after Florence and Krish make up from their arguments, the game suddenly moves the player forward 6 months, and suddenly, Florence and Krish are at a point of their relationship where they're ready to move in together. This seems well and good, as we have seen how good Florence and Krish have been together. They've both made tremendous positive impacts in the others' lives. However, by moving in now, 1 chapter after their arguments, the player is left to wonder if moving in is truly the best idea. Sure, it's been 6 months. That's a lot of time. That's the majority of their relationship to this point. But to us as the player, it's only a moment. It's only a second from the end of 1 chapter to the start of another. So the fear the player may have about the future of their relationship together in one house after significant arguments is embedded into the player's mind. But that thought, that instance of concern, is quickly hidden by the wholesome, uplifting atmosphere of the chapter. Moving in takes us through a variety of rooms in Florence's house, where we're given a variety of Krish's belongings to place into the rooms. But there's not enough space for all of Krish's belongings as well as ours, so we must compromise. And when they're moved in together, the game reminds us of their dreams. They're both pursuing the objects of their desires. Krish still attends music school, and Florence's artistic passions are aided by Krish as he provides her with paints and brushes. It's a simple set, but one that enables Florence the freedom to pursue her passions further. Despite their earlier arguments, Florence and Krish's relationship is still growing, and despite their imperfections, they have largely figured out how to function together, and they still love each other. Now, Florence isn't just eating microwave dinners in front of a TV, she's eating good, homemade food alongside Krish. While she previously ate in the dark, she now eats in the light alongside her boyfriend. When she is working, she's happier now. She still has to match numbers, but now the player does not have to do a thing. The numbers sort automatically. It's no longer tedious to her. Make no mistake, the job is still tedious, but it can no longer constrain her happiness. She can still be happy because she has Krish in her life. And after we see 2 scenes of Florence and Krish living together happily, we once again skip forward, this time an entire year. The previous time skip left the player on a scene with Florence and Krish recovering from an argument, and now we are left off with love and happiness. However, a year is once again a long time. Things change. That happiness, that routine, it can't last a year. The start of quarantine for COVID-19 in 2020 proved that much. Routines, even with those we love, quickly become a chore. That happiness, that joy, it can't always be preserved. And when the players see Florence and Krish again in Chapter 12, their relationship is starkly different. Florence and Krish are now sleeping apart, no longer cuddling together. Florence does not have the same energy in the morning as she once had early in her relationship with Krish. At work, Florence is once again sorting numbers manually. The tedium has returned. Florence once again is called by her mother, and the conversation is quite similar, nearly identical to that in the first chapter. And as for Krish, we once again see a thought bubble, and we see his dream. But as we uncover it, we see his frustration. He's no longer happy at the Music Academy. The times have changed, and so has Krish's emotions. The things he loved to do, the thing he dreamed of doing, the thing he had the opportunity to pursue, it's all monotony now. And when they return at the end of their day, they're eating pizza for dinner, not because they want to, but because their energy to make food is gone. Suddenly, the relationship we've seen is quite different. Florence and Krish are both dealing with tedium of time. Good things, happy emotions, they don't last forever. Chapter 12 is a reflection of Chapter 1. Then, Florence found tedium in her life because she had no joy to look forward to. Now, 11 chapters later, and Florence is finding tedium in her life because she no longer finds the same joy and love from the one who first freed her from her own life of tedium. And then, the game places no blame. Sometimes things just happen, and it's not always someone's sole fault. For Florence and Krish, no one is to blame. They simply aren't as happy as they once were. Much like Florence and her childhood friends, her and Krish are distancing over time. But now she does not have the luxury of knowing why. She distanced from her friends because she was forced away from her passions and forced into tedious academia. But now she's not being forced into anything. She's living the life that should give her happiness, but now is just not. And we don't need to know why. These things just happen. We don't need to know why, we just need to know how Florence feels. Nobody ever needs to justify their own frustration or emotions. If you're experiencing these emotions, then that's your own definitive. There's no need to justify what you feel, you just need to recognize that those feelings are yours. Florence may not know why she feels so suddenly distant from Krish, but she knows that she does now, and that recognition is all she can do. All this rut puts Florence back into a pseudo-depressive emotional state. The paint that Krish bought her is quickly buried away by various work-related papers. If the previous chapter, Chapter 13, shows the distance growing between Florence and Krish, Chapter 14 is representative of the stiffening of their relationships to the point where it is no longer redeemable. Once again, the text boxes return, and once again their conversation turns into a battle. They simply can't find the enjoyment they once found in one another. That connection that inspired both of them is gone. Their relationship is no longer functional, which the game demonstrates with yet another puzzle. The pieces show Florence and Krish on opposite sides of the bed, but as you complete the individual sides of the puzzle, you realize that the two sides do not connect together. Simply put, the two cannot find a connection anymore, and neither is to blame. It's simply not possible. They cannot find a connection because there is no connection to find. With time, their relationship died. There's nothing else to connect the two, so their lives begin to separate. Sometimes, even the people we love most, the people who have inspired us, the people we were closest to, they drift away. That's the curse of time, and the way time affects humanity. Humans are adaptable. We live in such a way where separation from people and communities is inevitable, and it's in our human nature to be able to do so, even when we don't want to. It stings, it hurts, moving on can be painful, and drifting away can be devastating, but it's in our nature to endure those things. Every one of us, every individual in the world has someone they used to be close to, a friend, a family member, a loved one who drifted away over time with no individual to blame. Moving on is not a bad thing. It's a painful thing, sure, but it's a human thing. And so, in a final effort to bring together two lives that are drifting apart, the player is asked to put together pieces of a shredded photo of Florence and Krish hugging. Fittingly, these pieces drift across the screen, making the puzzle more challenging, as even when you put a piece in place, it does not stay still. Unlike the previous puzzles with pieces resembling that of a jigsaw, these pieces are torn at the end, no connecting points. The pieces can be placed together in an order that shows a completed image, but the pieces cannot be permanently attached. They are always drifting apart. Because the pieces of the puzzle are constantly drifting, the puzzle itself can be frustrating. You have to manage not only the unsolved pieces, but the pieces that have already been placed. Because by design, pieces are not placed in this puzzle, they are organized. But even organized, as Krish and Florence's lives may have been, they ultimately still drift away. Nothing is stagnant. While one may make the reasonable deduction that deliberately frustrating mechanics are a function of bad game design, the frustration is intentional here. It's a piece of the narrative. Florence is a game designed to question how games work. By this rule, Florence is designed with mechanics specific and unique to best tell the story. Every scene conveys a different emotion, and thus every scene has unique gameplay. While frustrating, this scene helps the player understand the emotions of Florence and empathize with her. The game's ability to create an empathetic link between the player and Florence is the game's greatest strength. This scene, which deliberately frustrates the player, creates a meaningful connection. The frustration you feel attempting to put together the pieces of a drifting relationship is indicative of Florence's frustrations. Krish is her dream. He's the one that helped her escape the monotony of her own life. She was happy with him. She wanted a life with him. But their lives are still drifting away. Florence is losing her dream. This one scene, frustrating as it may be, connects the player to Florence's emotions as she makes her final effort to restore a relationship that is falling apart. But these efforts do not succeed. So, perfectly inverting Krish's move-in scene, you must move him out. This forces you to see how Krish's belongings have integrated into Florence's house. Now they must go away. Because of the jovial nature of the first scene, this scene, a mere image, reveals a potent emotion. You feel as if your life is regressing. You aren't making forward progress anymore. You're going backwards. You feel as if you're returning to a worse life, a life before you discovered meaning and value. So even though this is the natural step in life, you hardly want to move on because it feels like such backwards progress. Even if a life with Krish isn't realistic, it isn't sustainable, losing him is still painful. It's a breakup not of anger, but of incompatibility, which perhaps is more devastating. Neither can really get mad or feel remorse. They're both subjected to simply feeling sad. Florence returns to the corkboard of photos she took with Krish, and she tears away those memories. She'd become so hopeful that the life with Krish would happen, but it doesn't. Something that she cared so much about, it's stripped away from her at a moment's notice. She recognizes that a life she thought would be happy and pleasant, is hopeless. By losing Krish, Florence is losing the opportunity to live her dream life. As Florence tears Krish out of her photos, she becomes isolated in the world again. But now this isolation is seen in contrast to her happiness. That joy, that life with Krish, it's gone. And this may not be a bad thing. Breaking up, even with someone you love, can fundamentally be good. If there is not compatibility, there is not a sustainable relationship. This does not need to detract from love, as this does not need to detract from the joy that both Florence and Krish once experienced together. Still, those decisions are hard. Letting go of a good thing is never easy. Letting go of someone you cared about, something that changed your life, that's a far greater challenge. It's in our human nature to move on, even if moving on alone. But that doesn't make it easy. Chapter 18, Letting Go, is perhaps the most poignant chapter of Florence. In this chapter, Florence is walking away from Krish as Krish fades away behind her. The impact, however, is not because of the substance of the chapter, but of the solution. In order to progress, in order to move on, the player cannot touch any buttons. When you do, Florence slows down and Krish fades back into the scene. That is to say, in order to let go of Krish, the player must let go of the control. The player cannot do anything, they simply have to sit back and watch without intervening. This is a reminder not just of the pain of loss and moving on, but also that we are not Florence. We do not control her. We are nothing more than viewers, looking through the window of our screen to listen to her story and understand her emotions. But by letting go, Florence allows herself to understand her true dreams. Krish helped reveal her passions and fill her with the confidence to pursue them. But with Krish now gone, Florence has the freedom to pursue those things independently. Her life begins to change, all for the better. Florence begins to paint again. Because she has let go, she has opened up new opportunities for her life, and by pursuing those opportunities, Florence's life changes. She becomes happy again, and this happiness allows her to repair her relationship with her mom. Through the game, to this point, she has brushed off her mom, frustrated because of her menial labor. But now, in happiness, that relationship is recontextualized, and she pursues her mother to improve their relationship. In much the same way as she had with Krish, she makes new memories with her mother. Happy memories. They cook together. Florence's mom is a vessel of support as Florence wins second prize in an art competition. Not first, mind you, but second. Florence is growing, and she finds joy in her success, which enables her to continue to grow. She once again sorts numbers, but this time on her own accord and in her own happiness. She is sorting them for her art store. Those skills she may have developed in mundanity now benefit her in freedom. And then, in the final chapter of the game, the player is given a moment of euphoria alongside Florence as she quits her mundane job. She is freeing herself from those shackles because now she has another way to sustain her life. A much happier way than any time in her life before. As she clears out her office, she pulls back her keyboard to find a photo of her and Krish. She reflects on it for a moment. The photo shows her in a happy time. It shows her happy. It's a reminder of that time with Krish where she was so happy. And in her reflection, recognizing that happiness, she keeps the photo. She can look back on her relationship with Krish as a happy memory. The end of their relationship may have sparked sadness, but it allowed her to pursue the art she wanted to make. So those memories aren't sad, they're happy. Through it all, Florence is happy. Those bad times in her life, those bad moments with Krish, she does not regret them, because despite everything, Florence is able to reflect on her own happiness. The relationship was not ultimately right for her, but she was happy, and so now she can look back without regrets. All those things that happened to her, all of those sad moments in her life, they were fundamental to her own growth. And those moments defined her, and embracing herself, she is able to create a happy, more meaningful life. Florence is a beautiful game about the intimacy of the world and the characters in that world. The game thrives on creativity, using unique mechanics to spark certain emotions that allow the player to engage with the work. The game is only 30 minutes, but each minute is so deliberate, so intentional that even in the time you're able to understand Florence's emotions. In the end, you understand her. You understand how she feels and how she navigates emotions. It's a game that challenges what gameplay actually means, and by doing so has opened the door for creative storytelling that will have tremendous impacts in the storytelling power of video games going forward. And I wish I could end the discussion there. I wish I could finish explaining how Florence, a game about intimacy, freedom, creativity, and handling abuse, is a masterpiece, a landmark example in narrative design that will undoubtedly have a lasting impact on the future of game design as a whole. But such a thing can never be so simple. Florence does deal with abuse, it's true. Florence is constrained by workplace toxicity and a man whom she once loved growing irrationally angry at a moment's notice. This abuse is provoking and impactful, but it's also, unfortunately, rooted in reality. Before I continue, to be fair and just to everyone involved in the issues of abuse at Mountain Games, the studio behind Florence, I must recognize that I have no connection to the situation. In situations involving abuse, it's imperative that the voices of those involved are the primary voices heard. While taking the evidence from these accusations, one could easily make a verdict of guilt, but these situations are much more internally nuanced than that, and those nuances absolutely cannot be fully understood from an outside perspective. All we can do is listen and engage with the conversation, but we cannot judge the situation as outsiders without all of the information. Mountain Games, the developers of Florence, and Ken Wong, the founder of Mountains and creative director of Florence, have become the center of a new story of abuse in game design. Ken Wong has been directly accused by several former employees of abusive behavior at Mountain Games. The abuse was not sexual or physical in nature, rather the abuse was verbal and emotional, causing nearly all employees to quit Mountains because they did not feel safe or valued. Bringing forward allegations of abuse against anyone always poses a glaring risk to one's career. The situation at Mountain Games was no different, especially as Mountains was well regarded in the community. But if allegations are not brought forward when abuse is active, then the abuse will only worsen. So despite the risk, bringing forward allegations was a necessity for the workers at Mountains. But unfortunately for the former employees at Mountains, nothing has changed. There has been no resolve as Ken Wong continues to receive support from Annapurna Interactive, the publishers of Florence, enabling his career to continue despite repeated instances of abuse. Abuse is part of the game design industry. That is a sad reality, but abusive situations in game design seem even more personal when it happens in a small indie studio working on a personal passion project. So how does this happen? How does an accused abuser manage to make a game about abuse without any consequences? It's the sad reality of the current game design landscape that this behavior and these situations are not uncommon. And in order to fix this, to bring justice and a better game design landscape, we must understand that these situations are real. Abuse does happen. We, as designers, must understand why and how this happens, and we must be willing to engage with those discussions to bring awareness to these issues. Only then can the industry heal. Ken Wong is a self-proclaimed feminist, but former Mountains employee Tony Kakaluzzi, who has worked with Ken since the early days of Mountains, said this about Ken, quote, "This is a man who publicly labels himself as a feminist and an ally. I'm telling you right now, he's a liar." End quote. Despite claiming to seek equality and justice, Ken has a clearly distorted view of equality, leading to constant strings of abuse and manipulative behavior. This, however, is not an isolated incident. These behaviors are indicative of a greater issue within the video game design industry as a whole. Despite claims of progress, women are still consistently marginalized and oppressed, seen as lesser entities to men. And this may not be a deliberate behavior. The intentions of equity and progress may be true. However, internalized misogyny within the industry seems to be preventing this equity from becoming a reality. And until this sense of superiority is recognized and addressed, these issues of sexism and abuse will continue. While many of Ken's behaviors are private matters that have been publicly addressed, Ken Wong has still made public statements that bring to question his morality and views of marginalized groups, such as the LGBTQ+. In an interview, Wong said the following, quote, "Freedom is what our industry should be fighting for, and that means the freedom to create really hardcore experiences and to create male power fantasies," end quote. Well, Ken completes this thought by explaining that games can be soft as well, designed for disabled players and LGBT players. His views of power and equality have glaring issues. First, Ken distinguishes the, quote, male power fantasy as a form of hardcore game. By using terminology of gender, Ken implies that those hardcore experiences are more designed for men than they are for women. And his following comment also has a factor of concern. In contrast to the hardcore games for men, Ken describes soft, intimate games for disabled and LGBT players. Regardless of the sentiment, Ken's contrast also implies that LGBT and disabled players cannot engage with hardcore games. Rather, those people should be engaging with soft games. This statement may seem progressive at first, suggesting that there should be games for everyone, but it also suggests that not everyone can play every game, that gender, sexuality, and disabilities limits players from intense gameplay experiences. The same is true in reverse, that Ken is suggesting, perhaps unintentionally, that softer, more wholesome games are not designed to be played by straight men. Equality is not a matter of creating experiences uniquely for each different type of person. That notion, while perhaps done with good intention, is actually oppressive and detractive from equality. Equality is a matter of enabling all experiences to be accessible to all players. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a variety of games with unique experiences that can be enjoyed by different people, but that doesn't suggest that an entire group of people, say LGBT players, desire a specific type of game. If certain games are not accessible to certain players, then the problem is not with the variety of games being made, it's a problem of accessibility in the games we have. While the end result of having a greater variety of games is fundamentally a good thing, that does not mean each individual game shouldn't be concerned with accessibility and representation. Representation matters. Seeing your experiences, seeing people you can connect to is absolutely crucial. There is no reasonable argument that would suggest that the most well and overrepresented people group in games are not cisgender heterosexual white men. All other groups are either not represented or not represented well. The truth is, a disturbing amount of female representation in games is sexualized for the male gaze rather than an actual effort to create characters that well represent women and female players. Even if the majority of players are men, that does not mean that men should be the ones most well represented in video games. In fact, by doing so, and by ignoring the nuances of humanity and different people, we limit the accessibility of games. Largely, games that distance themselves from non-male leads are either ignored or criticized for that decision. Take a game such as The Last of Us Part 2, which was heavily and unfairly criticized even before launch for featuring a female protagonist, a lesbian relationship, and a uniquely strong, muscular, butch woman. There was no justification for the criticism, yet the criticism was still prevalent. An additional issue with the video game industry is that women are fetishized when involved with video games, either as players or as creators. By framing video games as a male-centric feature, women involved in the design space or the play space are labeled as female gamers, ones who have become a part of the male entertainment space. Women are often not treated as equals in the space, rather women are treated as inferior beings in a space not designed for them. This issue has plagued video games since the beginning. Women are a part of the design and play space because they equally belong there. By framing women in game design as entities that are breaking apart gender norms, we imply that their presence in the design space is an extraordinary situation rather than something that can and should simply be normal. Video games are a medium for all, but by framing it as a medium for men, even that contextualized feminism is still problematic, as it still upholds the notion that women in the design space are there as objects of masculinity, which have overcome gender normality and expectations to become a part of the design space. And by viewing women as such, we label them with inferiority and ignore their qualifications. By framing women in this way, we suggest that no qualification or experience can strengthen their ability in design as greater than a man's ability, even if that man is less qualified. This is, by the accusations, the problem with Ken Wong at Mountain Studios. This is why the employees at Mountains voted unanimously to remove Ken from leadership at the studio. However, Ken was never removed from any part of that leadership position, and as such, Ken is now the only remaining employee at Mountains. All other employees have left, including 2 additional members of leadership who both cited Ken's behavior as the primary factor for their leave. Despite making a game about overcoming marginalization and verbal abuse, Mountains was unable to overcome both of those issues at their own studio. But, unfortunately, this issue is not only present at Mountain Games. The issue of equality, especially with women, has been present throughout the industry. Recently, there have been many instances of women being abused, verbally, physically, and sexually. This has been seen throughout the industry and continues to be a factor that prevents the game design industry from achieving equality. Though there are many nuances to each situation, it is not unreasonable to suggest that women are abused because they are fetishized in that design space. Because some men in game design view women as inferior entities in the design space, nefarious behaviors towards women are often normalized. But by bringing awareness to these issues and making the victims of abuse heard, the game design industry can heal. The fight for equity will not stop until equity is achieved. These issues, no matter how small, must be discussed, and these new generations of game developers have a unique ability to change and improve the design space and continue those strides to equality. By discussing these matters, the industry can and will change. Game design should be about creating unique and innovative experiences that are accessible to all, with all different people represented. Bringing about equality will fundamentally improve the games that are made. Marginalized voices may often be the strongest ones in the industry.